Hello, everyone. Julia here for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. Thanks for joining us today or watching this later for a very important topic. We have had a part one, it was a year ago, but we're back again because it's hard to get us all together, and especially two very busy astrologers like Luis and Gemini. Thanks for joining me again, you two.
Pleasure.
From Are you in you are in Portugal, but now it's in what city again?
Lisbon.
Lisbon. You are in Lisbon, and Gemini up in San Francisco or north of San Francisco. Welcome again. So yes, those of you online here have registered, so you know what you're in for. But for others that are watching, let's say for the first time, there is a part one of this series that we're doing about the differences that we should consider or talk about in regard to doing astrology from the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. Of course, Northern astrology is Northern Hemisphere biased in a sense because it developed up there. And now that there's more astrology around the world, we're kind of collecting what we can to talk about. So, just any thoughts about part one that we did? We talked about the lunar nodes and how their ascending and descending reverses in the southern hemisphere. And of course, the ascending, descending sort of notion and meaning coming from ascending going to the north, although north is north, but it still has that connotation as you're moving forward or going, that's your direction in life. Anything you want to sort of just pick up back on there just quickly, guys, in regard to what you've learned or talked about with people since we did that one? Nothing's come up?
What I would say is my main conclusion when I'm seeking what in the heavens is the zodiac is that, like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, it is directionally aligned. And the thing that I'll go back to again and again as we explore this and the difference between these two hemispheres is that we measure planets in the signs from the center of the Earth, where we are all connected. And that geocentric point of view, of course, is not experiencing winter in one hemisphere and summer in the other. There's not seasons down there in the middle. But when we speak about houses and surface experience, of course, it's not only significantly different north and south, but from one latitude to another. So yeah, I'm finding that the tropical zodiac is all about something that exists beneath our feet to some extent. So I think I'll probably go there some today.
Grounded, right. Well, yes, grounding us all in this universal experience. Yes. What about you, Luis?
Well, I've been working with historical topics a lot lately. So what I've been doing is researching how this, and I'll be publishing that soon, how this question was explored historically.
Oh, are
So,
you? Oh,
yeah.
fantastic. Wow,
So
wow.
once the southern hemisphere becomes a thing,
A thing, a
uh,
known,
how
yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
how are you dealing? Because astrology practice continues. It's brought to the new territory. So now what do
Yeah,
you do when everything is upside down?
yeah.
And there's
Fantastic.
a
Oh
lot of
man,
very interesting information there.
we have to get you down here, Luis. When do you think that book is well, have you got a timeline for that?
No, it's not a book. These are two papers I'm going to
Oh, papers.
publish.
Yep.
One which is on astrogeography of the South Hemisphere of the new
Oh,
territories is
wow.
coming up perhaps next month, and the
Oh,
other one
wow. Yep.
sometime next year.
Will they be in English?
They are in English, and if all goes well, they will be available for free. So
Oh,
there will be an
fantastic.
open access publication.
Wonderful. Please let us know when that's out. So
Yes, I will.
fantastic. And I've just been talking to more people in the Southern Hemisphere about their nodal experience. And again, I'm not ready to put that out there yet, but many sort of, let's say, experiences of seeing the nodes in a different light, which is significant. So again, a questionnaire that we would like to develop for those that want to be involved, and also what's the word? Yeah, share their experiences or client experiences as well. So let's get into this share. I'm not going to put the sound on Gemini, okay, so that we can play this in the screen. All right, can you see that? Yes?
Yeah.
Great, okay. So that's us. As you can see, I'm just trying to get my pointer happening. Here we go. That's all right. Okay, cool. So yes, thanks for joining us. Important topic. I don't want it to write. I just want it to show.
I
All
love
right.
that picture of you, Yulia.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. Woo! What's that?
I said, I love that picture of you.
Oh, thank you. I had to find a new one for anyway, I'm hopeless with my self-promotion and photos, but anyway, I found one. I found another one. Okay, so look, let's just begin. I just wanted to put two charts of one in Melbourne right now, or very close, and one in Santa Cruz, which is the same latitude in the in the northern hemisphere. And just wanted to kind of start with showing, of course, many of us will know this, but in an astrology chart, yes, everything's turned. It's a different time up there. We're at the same latitude, but there's so many things we don't actually see in the chart, isn't there? Like the things that we're talking about. And the things that we're talking about today are the signs that are fast ascending and slow ascending. What's the other words we have for them? Crooked and
Straight and crooked. Yeah,
straight
so
and crooked
straight
signs.
signs are the signs of short ascent or of long ascension, and crooked signs are the signs of short ascension.
Yeah, so and you've probably heard of all those. Now, Luis, can you just remind us, let's say, besides horary, what other practices in astrology would we be using these differences of ascending and descend, slow and fast ascension and that type of thing?
Mhm.
I can only
Well,
really think of horary, but
orrery or no, actually any kind, because there is this idea that it's not at the forefront, but that aspects are changed if they happen in long ascension or in short ascension aspect. So the aspect would be sort of extended in long ascension and
uh-huh.
shortened in faster ascending sign. So sextiles would become squares, squares would become sextiles, etc. So the nature of the aspect could somehow be changed, or at least partially changed, by the type of sign where the aspect is occurring. So that's
Uh-huh.
something that you see throughout the practice, and this of course goes for orrery, mundane elections, or even
Yes,
natal
of course,
astrology.
mundane. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one
That
of the most ancient timing techniques, right, being
yeah.
primary directions, which really forced astrologers to invent so much spherical trigonometry. I mean, it's like one of the great gifts that astrology has given to mathematics and astronomy in general was this quest for house systems, which Louis could teach better than anybody. But also so much of the primary directions timing technique where of course there's been arguments for thousands of years of how we should do the math, and some of that is based on the difficulty of calculating ascensional times, if I'm correct.
Yeah. It's critical because
Mm.
everything will move slightly different and at slightly different speed depending on where you are, and that has to be taken into account.
Yeah, and
And
I
then,
mean, software
yeah.
will tell you these things, or some software, not all of it. Yes.
Well, I'm still to see a software that does primary directions properly. This has
Uh-huh.
been a complaint of mine for
Mm.
millions of years. There are good approximations. There are a couple of them that do good work, but it's not so much in terms of calculation, but most of the time in terms of display, they can be very confusing. And I think that's one of the reason, not being accessible and being very confusing in the way they put out the data, that most people don't use primary directions. That I think it's one of the main reasons,
Mhm.
which, for example, for chart rectification is absolutely essential.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I remember, 20 years ago studying astrology. I know things have changed, that astronomy or the more technical kind of understanding of the chart has become more important, thank goodness, I think. But I remember, looking at the MC in a chart and and thinking that the reason it was, let's say, moving back, left and right during the day, well, was more seasonal until I looked further and go, it's every day it's moving back and forward, and that back and forward is not back and forward, it's up and down. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was like, oh, now I get it. Now I've got it. And it made me go further. And I think there's just probably so many people. And look, I think animating charts is really, really helpful. Like animating a chart. And since we, let's say, began doing that, or we could do that. If you don't do that, it's a really great way to learn all these things. But of course, all these other settings that we don't have.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to explain a bit today with
Yeah.
with the high and low
Yeah.
signs and so on.
You
Anything else you
can
want
see
to add
that in
there?
the charts. Yeah, you can see that in the charts you have here because, for example, the South Hemisphere chart for Melbourne, you have this widening between the MC in early Libra and the ascendant almost past the middle of Capricorn, in which in the southern hemisphere, Capricorn is going to be a slow rising sign, while Libra is a fast rising sign. So you can see it, in the way that Libra is faster, so it drags the MC, a little,
Bit
and
further.
opens up the distance. While if you had Cancer, what will happen? It would close down to Taurus because you're having this. They're slowing down, and while
Ah,
in the Santa Cruz chart, both Capricorn and Aries for the northern hemisphere are fast moving signs. They have equivalent speed, so they're almost in a right angle because the speeds are not that different, so they're more or less
yes, of
balanced.
course, we can see that right angle. Yeah. Yeah, the
Mm.
cardinal aspect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find that whole thing easier to express directionally. So when we get into some images that will help, and
Yeah.
also maybe
Well,
I can show a couple charts where we get the same ascendant degree north and south. But I think an important thing to see here, and I'm sure everybody who's attending has witnessed this, that when the equinox signs are on the rise, and I think it's important to say, like, as you see, these are tropical zodiac charts. When the equinox points specifically 0 Aries and 0 Libra rise and set, then you get that perfect cross
mm,
between the horizon and the meridian or the angles of the chart. And it's going to most diverge from perpendicular when the solstice degrees rise. And as Luis was saying, like whether it's kind of midheaven leaning towards the west, it might look like, and it's not, by the way, or towards the east, it depends on hemisphere, it depends on which sign is rising. I have a good friend who moved from Brazil to Toronto, and in his nativity in Brazil, Cancer rising with a Taurus midheaven, that image that Luis was describing before. And then when he moved to Toronto, his relocated chart, it's Cancer rising with a Pisces midheaven. And we might expect that because Aries is the 10th sign from Cancer, that the Cancer ascendant would be paired with an Aries midheaven. But as we get into
yeah,
an
those pairings are really interesting too, isn't it? Where's my pairing? Yeah, I remember you've shown us that before as well. Gemini, yeah, fascinating stuff. But I suppose just showing these charts, I just want, because this is what most people look at, or a version of this, right? So that we're going to make it more 5D now. Okay. And this is Rumev College. Oh, oops. I'm just going to play this because it's a simple way of looking what we're talking about mostly today. Um, as we see the ascending signs from the northern hemisphere, and then if we imagine looking down from the south, um, and we can see, well, these are of course the sidereal signs. So Virgo there is in Leo, Libra in Virgo rising, Scorpio rising, Sagittarius rising. So they were the long ascension signs from the north, yeah? And then the short ascension signs, as you can see. Is that correct, Gemini?
It's a little bit hard for me to tell in this
Oh,
one.
okay.
I'm
All
like,
right.
is that the prime meridian? What's going on here? But
Well, it's
yeah,
the
in
equator
the
and the
video I'll
eclipse.
show you, it'll be easier for me to
Yeah.
explain.
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that this is so as you can see, these are the long ascension going straight up, and then the short, the other way around. Now, hang on. Oops. What's going on? So thank you to Rumev Kolev, who's apparently got some amazing software, but I haven't used it. Have you guys used his software?
Long
No.
time ago. I
Ah,
have
okay. Yeah,
a
yeah.
version of that. Quite
Uh-huh.
good.
Oh, okay. So I just put these two together and Gemini's made an amazing animation, but I just wanted to show you. So this is now Santa Cruz again for the what we're looking at 2 a.m. this morning, or it's not 2 a.m. there because I've got it for the 22nd. So in the next day, right? And up the top here, we've got Cancer, 90 degrees of cardinal right on the midheaven here. And we can see that in Santa Cruz, Cancer is, quite high up there. But by the time we get to Capricorn, right, Capricorn on the MC, we have it very low, right? So this is 12 hours difference, okay? And then when we go to Melbourne, Australia, it's quite the opposite with Cancer up on the midheaven. Oh, sorry, my ear just got blocked. Uh, it's, as you can see, quite the opposite. So we've got Capricorn as the high signs in the southern hemisphere, and Cancer, or the solstice points, of course, the low signs in the southern hemisphere, and the
Can I add
opposite,
a
the
piece to
north,
that,
right?
Yulia?
Sorry?
Can I add a piece to that?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So I want everyone to just
Which one do you want, north or the south?
remember the experience you've had many, many times, which is when you walk towards a building, it appears to get taller. And when you walk away from it, it appears to get shorter, right? In a sense, that's what's going on here, except for the building walks towards you. The bounds of the sun's path, right, the heart of the zodiac, which we call the ecliptic, are the tropics. Tropics comes from the Greek tropikos, which means turnaround, right? So if we just follow the sun moves from the Tropic of Capricorn for 6 months north until it turns around at the Tropic of Cancer, right? And then heads back. And we assume, I think, because we often learn astrology through witnessing the path of the sun, especially in modern times, that that's some annual thing. Like Yulia was saying before, she expected what she was seeing with the midheaven to be an annual thing, but it's every day. Because really the sun is moving through the signs, moving from the Tropic of Capricorn, which is the southern bounds of the sun's path, to the Tropic of Cancer, which is the northern bounds. This works for the moon as well. Now the moon can go out of bounds, and so there's more to consider there. But in general, and you'll see this in my animation, there's north signs and there's south signs. And Yulia, of course, lives in a place, Melbourne, Australia, which is south of Earth's Tropic of Capricorn. And therefore, Capricorn is the degree of the zodiac that is closest to her. And because it's closest, just like when you walk towards that building, it appears really tall in the sky, then she's going to experience Capricorn planets, be it the sun or the moon or Jupiter, Saturn, whatever, very high in her local sky, whereas the Tropic of Cancer is the furthest zodiac degree from Yulia, and so Cancer is very low. Of course, the opposite is true for Luis and myself. We live just about as far north of the equator as Yulia lives south, which is a fun thing about this collective. But for me, because I'm in the Bay Area of California, the Tropic of Capricorn is the furthest zodiac degree from me, and therefore lowest in the sky. And the Tropic of Cancer is the closest degree, and therefore highest in the sky.
Yeah, I just want to point out also what Gemini was talking about, that the equator is the blue circle there. So when it crosses the ecliptic, we can see that the horizon, everything meets up at 0 Aries and 0 Libra. So it's quite fascinating to watch this. Also, I would recommend Stellarium. It's a free program, and animate. See it turn every day, and then you see the whole circle and how far west it goes or how far east it goes as well, from east and west, which again, Gemini's animation will show. But again, being aware of those things is not what we're taught. Anything else to add there before we move on? Anyway, this is like basic sort of, graphics to show you these
I will
things.
also add there's a software,
Oh,
Horoscopus, the K, which does the same thing as Stellarium or something similar, but
oh,
more astrological,
what's it
because it
called?
can Horoscopus with a
Horoscopos.
K.
With a
Horoscopus.
K, Horoscopos.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where's that been developed?
It was a young man in Germany who made it for his final project in school. Do you know his name, Luis? I can't remember it right now.
I don't remember it right now, but yeah, but the program is good. I think it is still under development. I haven't updated it for some time, but you can
Ah,
project the
great.
zodiac, not just the constellations. You can do the proper zodiac and
And
project a
house
chart
divisions,
Oh,
and
that's
house
fantastic.
which
divisions.
is
Oh
beautiful.
my.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I've been
And
waiting
it's
for
a
something like
great
that.
segue into where we're going next.
Yes,
Because
okay. Fantastic.
horoscopos or horoscopos was one of the Greek terms for the ascendant, the ascending sign, and particularly the ascendant degree, right? So when we hear this word horoscope these days, we think of some newspaper column, or maybe the whole chart. And that term horoscope has now been applied to any map of the sky. And it's important to remember that a chart is a map of the sky for a particular moment in time from a particular place on Earth, right? But horoscopos is Greek for the hour marker, or they also say for the hour watcher, like, for those of us who would be sitting on the ziggurat, probably calling out what star is rising when we hear the gong because the princess is born, or whatever it may be, right? But another name for the ascendant degree was oiox or iakos, and it means the rudder. Demetra George sent me this image some time ago when she took one of my astronomy classes, because of a thing that I show, and you'll see it a bit in the animation that we're going to. And she was like, well, look at this. And they were clearly translating this word, oiox, as rudder, and showing also the correlation to ascendant. And then maybe it's not shown here, but the funny thing is, like, they didn't correlate the two. So you will often hear astrologers speak of the ascendant as the helm. And you kind of picture in the maritime metaphor, which is very common in traditional astrology, like the wheel of some ship or something. But back then, they didn't have wheels, they had the rudder and the tiller. And so this idea of the rudder is very important, because what I'm finding is it's clearly an astronomical term, right? And so, like, I was born with a Gemini rudder, and so they would say that Mercury is the steersman of my life's journey, right? In so many words. And so I'm going to show you this this ring, thanks to Stellarium astronomy software, and we'll get to see how first from the equator, how some signs head south and some head north, or some to the right and some to the left, if we look at it from this ring's point of view. Because when we look at the astronomy software, if you haven't spent a lot of time outside, some of the lines might be confusing. So, Yulia, would you actually
Yep.
please go back
Oh,
one
back.
to those images that you had on the screen?
Yeah. Oh, hang on. Oh, it's going the other way.
If everybody imagines, maybe just close your eyes and think about a spinning globe. Think and see how the equator is the plane of that rotation, the daily motion of the Earth. All right. And see how Earth's equator is perpendicular to our rotational axis, right? So South Pole and Santa's place at the North Pole, right? Well, the celestial equator, if you look to the screen, it's the circle shown in blue. The celestial equator is simply Earth's equator projected into the sky, right? And it's perpendicular to the pole, which is north-south. And so as you can see, the blue circle on both of these images, they move through the east and the west directions, as Yulia said. The golden curve, that's the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun through our sky, because it's the path that Earth takes in our annual orbit about the light, right? And as we watch the sun move through the houses every day, we are experiencing our planet's daily rotation. Again, the plane of that is the equator, the plane of the day. As we watch the sun move through the constellations or through the signs, we're experiencing Earth's secondary motion, which is our orbit of the sun. All right. So one thing that you'll often be taught about the angles of the chart that are wrong are that the midheaven's right above your head. That's just not true. It's typically not even the highest part of a chart. And that the ascendant is east. The ascendant is on the eastern horizon, but as we're going to see, it's only due east twice a day, and that's when 0 Aries or 0 Libra rise. When I say this, by the way, I'm speaking about Earth's zodiac, the tropical zodiac, not a sidereal zodiac or a constellational zodiac. So the last thing I'll say about these images is you can't really have this experience outside because we're looking east and west and north at the same time, right? So you have like fly eyes or maybe fish eyes or I don't know. So we're going to start in the animation I'm going to show you by facing east, and we're going to do so from Earth's equator. All right, please let it play.
Start it, yes. Oh.
You can maybe, oh, we're good. Right,
Want me to
so,
stop? Oh, hang
no,
on.
that was good.
Wait, how can I stop it without?
Okay,
Let's
so
play
here
it
you
first,
see
and then we can
the
play it again.
ascendant. I don't hear the music anymore on my side. So the ascendant technically would be where the ecliptic or the heart of the zodiac, the sun's path, intersects the eastern horizon. Now, 6 of our 12 signs are northern signs. And one of the ways that we can experience this is that they rise north of east. The northern signs also set north of west. So if you've noticed that the sun does not rise in the same place on your horizon every day, this is why. The sun's moving through the signs. The northern extreme is the Tropic of Cancer, the cusp of Gemini and Cancer, right? Let's go to the southern signs now. We cross the equator moving south, and we're moving through Libra, and then Scorpio, and then Sagittarius. And this is fun. Sagittarius is all about the great adventure, right? It takes us to the southern extreme, and then it's Capricorn. And Capricorn's like, you have responsibilities. Go back to the tribe, right? And so we'll see the rudder now, or the ascendant, coming back from the southern extreme, which is the Tropic of Capricorn, to get to due east, the cardinal direction, again at 0 Aries. And so I'm going to speed this up and just show you this is every day. Okay, this is like one day or one sidereal, one tropical day. We're watching the rudder of the ascendant ruddering back and forth, north and south across the cardinal direction. It's due east every day when 0 Aries or 0 Libra rises. Now we were looking from the equator where the celestial equator is vertical in the east and goes right above your head. But now I'm moving this to the Bay Area of California. It'd be very similar for Lisbon, Portugal, where Luis is. We're both about 38 degrees north of Earth's equator. It's the same as Athens, Greece, the same as Seoul, Korea. We experience the same sky, just at different times. And so here you're going to have to kind of tilt your head to see the same experience that does the ring shape or the fountain shape. And so this is how it works where I live. Same thing though, and this is really important, whether we are in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, a thing I can say about Leo is it rises north of east and it sets north of west. A thing that I could say about Scorpio is it rises south of east and it sets south of west. Now, a thing that's very different for Scorpio, for Yulia, south of the equator in Australia, and for me, is that for me, Scorpio's far away. It's a southern sign. For Yulia, Scorpio's close by. It's a southern sign, and she's in the south, right? Again, the closest degree of the zodiac to me is the Tropic of Cancer, right? 0 tropical Cancer. And the furthest degree is 0 Capricorn. And as we turn our attention from the ascendant here, where the ecliptic's intersecting the eastern horizon, shortly in this video, we're going to turn our heads and we're going to look to the midheaven. Now, I'm only showing this for the northern hemisphere, so we'll have to go back to those illustrations. And again, now we're kind of fly eyes, okay? We're looking east and south and west at the same time. For any of us who reside north of Earth's Tropic of Cancer, like Luis and myself, the midheaven is always due south. I should say, to be more specific, the meridian midheaven, which technically speaking is where the ecliptic, or the path of the sun, and the heart of the zodiac intersects the meridian above the ground. What is the meridian? It's a north-south circle, goes right above our head, down beneath our feet, through the directions north and south on the horizon. And because it's north-south, it separates the eastern sky, which goes up, from the western sky, which goes down. Right, with the horizon and the meridian, now we have the cross of matter that forms the angles of the astrology chart. All right. So importantly, what you're going to see here is why there are straight and crooked signs, or why there are long and slow signs of ascension. And it has everything to do, as Yulia was mentioning before, with altitude, really. So from the northern hemisphere point of view, Cancer is the highest sign, right? Well, it's actually Gemini and Cancer, right? Gemini takes the sun every year, or the moon every month, to its highest place, the Tropic of Cancer, and then it comes back, it turns around and starts getting lower again. So Gemini and Cancer have the same altitude, and when the sun is there, that casts the same length of shadow. That's Anti-Scia or Anticia, all right? So maybe you could pause this, Yulia.
Yep.
On the left there, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, you can see that the midheaven is in a high sign because it's from the northern hemisphere point of view, and it's in the northern sign. It's in Cancer. You can see that little Cancer glyph a little bit to the right of where Yulia's mouse is. Further to the right on the ecliptic, do you see how stellarium? Oh, no, sorry. Way up at the top of the screen, Yulia, just to the right of the midheaven, you'll see stellarium has a tiny little Cancer glyph.
Oh, yes, here, sorry. Yeah.
Right. So that's 0 Cancer. And then to the east of there are higher degree or lower, further degrees of Cancer, which are actually lower in the sky. But either way, we get a very high midheaven degree there, right? And so consider that the ascendant, like the angle that the ascendant addresses the horizon there, it has to be very steep. So this is called a straight sign. And the straight signs rise slowly, because just think about like the tip of my finger here being 0 degrees and the palm being 30, right? This like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Whereas if you'll just move it forward, Yulia, until we get a very low midheaven. That'll do, thank you. Right here we have late Sagittarius at the midheaven. I can tell because I see the Capricorn glyph, and maybe more importantly, because I see the galactic center over there in the 4th quadrant. Because the midheaven is very low altitude, the ascendant takes a very, not a steep angle, right? It's a low angle, or they call it a crooked angle, right? So they're not talking about like criminal when they say straight and crooked, right? They're literally, it's physics.
You know some Sagittarians?
Right, well, maybe a little crooked. But anyway, so when it's tilted like this, notice that my hand is just rising, like the degrees from 0 to 30 are rising in a short amount of time, just the way that it addresses the horizon. The other thing I'd say is, like, when we put this in a chart, we're looking at that midheaven apparently moving left and right of the vertical, right? What's actually happening is we are staring, I'm just going to speak northern hemisphere first, we're staring south. The midheaven, the meridian midheaven, is always due south. For any of us who are north of Earth's Tropic of Cancer, like in Portugal or the Bay Area of California where I am, right? But your shoulders in the chart are not squared to east and west. They follow the rudder, Okay, so is the ascending sign, in this case on your screen, it's a southern sign, right? So that rises south of east. Well, the descendant will always be exactly opposite. So if you have a southern sign rising, you have to have a northern sign setting. If the ascendant is south of east, the descendant will be north of west. And when I turn my shoulders to what I call like the personal directions instead of Earth's directions, and I like rainbow my arms up from there to the midheaven, or actually not to the midheaven, to the highest point of the chart, it's not the ecliptic. They call it the nonagesimal. There's probably a better pronunciation, but it just means 90 degrees from the ascendant descendant axis. That's the highest part of your chart, right? And so what you're seeing when you see the midheaven kind of going left and right, what's actually happened is where like the chart is doing this amazing thing for us in our computer charting days, where you're kind of turning your shoulders like this to map the ascendant and the ascendant, and therefore you're turning back and forth and kind of staying with the highest part of the chart, whether it's really high or low. And then as you turn your shoulders from south of east to north of east, right, or north of west to south of west, where south is in respect to that highest part of the curve will look like it's going left or right. Okay, if a southern sign is rising, so the ascendant is south of east, and therefore a northern sign is setting, so the descendant is north of west, and if the meridian midheavens due south, well, south of east is closer to south than north of west is. And so in that case, from a northern hemisphere perspective, you're going to have a larger third quadrant and therefore first quadrant than you will fourth quadrant and therefore second quadrant in the chart. Before we were looking, Yulia had those images in Santa Cruz, California, so northern hemisphere, and then also in Melbourne, Australia, so southern hemisphere, right? In the southern hemisphere, the meridian midheaven will always be due north. Right. And I mean, it's a little bit harder to show a chart and then show the astronomy next to it for the southern hemisphere. You kind of have to flip one around and look through the page.
You've got to flip it right. Yes, and then see through, and then have it see through. Like, yeah, I've done that for classes, going, this is actually how we should be looking at it as a chart. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like harder to teach because my students are global and I also want to honor all of the earth and not just speak for the Greek point of view or how it looked from Egypt or Babylon or India, which changes, right? But this is an important truth because a lot of the rules that we're utilizing, like for ascensional times, will be based upon the Northern Hemisphere math. And that's why we're assembled here today, right? To speak about, well, if we're talking about like in a horror area, it's going to take a long time for my cat to find his way home due to a sign of long ascension at a critical place. Well, if in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm applying that statement to
come back real quick.
A sign that actually has short ascension in the Southern Hemisphere, shouldn't that be shorter, right? Okay, hopefully that helped with this. Usually I teach this stuff over the course of weeks and we get to this point. So I think it's going to be a lot to look at.
It's fantastic, Jim. And what a great animation. And I'm sure people are going to kind of keep watching or, be able to watch this and stop it and stuff. But, it's really good to understand that. And just, imagine it sort of the opposite way from the south. Very important stuff to understand. I'm just going to see, does anyone have any questions at this point while we finish watching this animation again?
I see stuff in the chat, but not in the Q&A. And I'll just say, I wish this animation then went straight from here to Melbourne, Australia, 38 degrees south of the equator. I'll just say what would happen is we still get the Gemini Cancer cusp to the north of east and the Sagittarius Capricorn cusp to the south of east, but the celestial equator would be leaning towards the left, towards the north, where the midheaven would be. Okay, and you would still see this ruddering of the ascendant. Really, it's the ascendant-descendant axis across the cardinal directions, right? But the straight and crooked signs are different because, again, a sign is straight because at that time, it's not really the midheaven, it's the highest part of the chart is high above the ground. And then when we have a lower top of the chart, you get this so-called crooked signs. And for the final time, crooked signs really fast to rise, straight signs very slow to rise. So hopefully that brings a little bit of the spatial awareness as we address this by talking about time.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, things that we noticed in the south is many of you from the southern hemisphere here. I was this year, in June, I saw the moon walk the land from, 55 degrees latitude in the northern hemisphere. As the southern hemisphere was celebrating the Capricorn moon at its highest point we would ever see. I saw it as the lowest point. I mean, it was incredible to witness that. I was so surprised. I wasn't expecting to just go, oh my God, it's never going to rise. It's just walking across the pine trees that I was, sitting in front of. It was amazing. So it's that kind of thing. It was in Capricorn. It was at its highest. It was out of bounds, wasn't it? It's its fullest. It was at its, what's it called? What do we call that? It was at
The
its
lunar
full reach.
maximum.
Yeah, the lunar maximum. And therefore, but anyway, it was just the right place and right time to see it. I didn't know I was going to do that. So, and then things like, and I remember noticing, traveling to the USA and going, why is Capricorn so low? Not why, but because, Scorpio, all the high signs in the southern hemisphere are so low there, and you just really do notice that. So keep an eye out for that, especially those of you. Luis, have you been to the southern hemisphere before?
Yes, I have
Yes.
been twice in Brazil, but
Oh,
very
yes.
close to the tropics, so the
Oh,
difference is not as great.
yes. Well, that's
And
where
I
we
could,
see everything go like this.
yeah, and I only had a chance to observe the night sky one of the times because the other one was completely clouded, which
Yeah,
was a
yeah, yeah.
frustration. But
Right.
I've been there recently in April, and I managed to see the Southern Cross and some of the constellations I don't see up here. So
Yes.
very nice.
Yes. Beautiful. Let's go to Luis. So yes, you have again, as you said, so many things to say. Let us know about what the thinking is behind the changes of the signs generally, or more generally, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I've been studying, researching lately is um, how did astrology in the Southern Hemisphere develop? And it is a very interesting story, which I'll shorten it here, but it is a very interesting story because, as we well know, astrology is born in the Northern Hemisphere and it's practiced in the Northern Hemisphere. And for a long time, it was believed that below the equator, in the tropical area, you couldn't live because it would be too hot, and the rest of the world was sort of inhabitable. That was the ancient perception. But once the global navigations start to rise and you start moving south, suddenly they understand that that's not correct. You're finding very luscious and very, very fertile lands around the equator, and you're finding people living in the southern regions of the world. The world is much wider than was imagined, and it leads then to the discovery of the New World, of the American continent, and Australia, and everything down south. So my question at the beginning of this research was, okay, so what happens to astrology then? How are they going to deal with the fact that there is an inversion of the signs? And this is something I stumbled across when I was researching for my PhD thesis, is that we would think that when the navigations begin, right at the beginning of the 15th century, and then moving on to the 16th century, that this discussion would be very out there,
Big,
and they
yeah.
would do it. It would be big, but it doesn't seem so, at least not in a written word. But then the first mention I could find in astrological books, there might be others, but I couldn't find them, is Cardano. And Cardano, in his commentary to Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, says that, okay, in the Southern Hemisphere, when he's explaining the rulerships, and because Ptolemy, bases his whole explanation of the rulership system on the seasons. both the exaltations, the dignities, and everything else. So what Cardano very lightly says, well, and for the southern hemisphere, we have to reverse this. But he leaves it at that and doesn't give any further explanation. And for almost 50 years, you don't see this being picked up by anyone. And only in the in the 30s, Campanella, Tommaso Campanella, writing his book, discusses this and says, okay, so if Ptolemy claims that Leo and the moon, so Leo is the house of the sun, and the moon is the house of Cancer, because those are the summer signs where they are more luminous, the luminous sun the year, and Saturn the opposite, then by reason, it's going to be the reverse in the southern hemisphere, so it should change. So Saturn should rule Leo in the southern hemisphere, and as well as Cancer, and the sun and the moon will rule Aquarius and Capricorn, respectively.
Wow.
And for a long time, you see this discussion along in Europe in the books, where they are attempting this idea of reversal of the signs. However, what I think happens is that once we there's the establishment of cities and colonies in South America to begin with, you have physicians practicing astrology there. And by the mid 16th century, you already see books being printed in the southern hemisphere with people who have experienced astrology in the southern hemisphere, and they disagree with this idea. They say, we do not observe this inversion of the dignities. And so they say something like, and I'm completely paraphrasing this, so Ptolemy was wrong, as he was wrong in many other things. So the explanation for the rulerships of the signs have to be something else than the seasons. And then they say, even justifying by Aristotelian logic, that if the signs are a superior cause, they are a celestial cause, so they are superior, they cannot be changed by an inferior effect like that of the seasons.
Yeah, right.
But this discussion is interesting because if you accept the idea of inversion, and I think it's Athanasius Kircher, a famous Jesuit who dabbled in almost everything of knowledge of this period, he says, okay, if we're accepting this, and he believes that this is so, we have to inverse everything, then we have a greater problem. Because if you're in the temperate zone of the north, you have the normal rulerships. If you're in the temperate zone of the south, you have the inverse rulerships. But what about the equator? In the equator, the seasons are not as definite. So the rulerships would have to be something else.
Well, they're just
and
too
if you go
wet
exactly,
and, hot or whatever.
exactly. So he mixes up, and he even gives us a table proposing things, a very confusing table, because he doesn't explain his own rationale. And he said, and in the poles, we also have to create a new rulership system. So that would be that the rulership, which is a fundamental aspect of astrological interpretation, would change according to latitude, which would be make impossible any practice of astrology at all.
Wow.
And then we have, of course, this is in the 1640s, and then we have, of course, the practitioners of the South saying, no, we're practicing astrology,
and it works.
And it works for medical purpose.
Right.
It works as is expected. We're publishing almanacs, we're doing our predictions, we're interpreting eclipses, we are forecasting weather, and it works as it should with the adjustments to the south, which is, of course, the fact that if you are considering that the northern latitude makes a planet stronger for the north, then southern latitude makes a planet stronger for the south.
Yeah.
If you want to calculate directions or work with anything to do with movement, as we were discussing early, then primary directions and tables have to be adjusted for the southern hemisphere, so it makes sense because there is an inversion of the perspective, and that's what they're doing. Regarding the nodes, which was our discussion, I haven't seen yet an author that has dealt with that question regarding the south, but they do recognize that the logic for latitude has to be inversed.
Okay.
And of course,
so that's a good that's a good point to really consider to start with, and the rest is a bit mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I do like well, it's how I said Mars is stationing on our Saturn in Leo. From the southern hemisphere chart, Saturn is, in rulership in Leo. That's
Yeah,
just
but
interesting,
the thing is,
yeah.
as Campanella puts it very well, if you go with that logic, then there's more inversions you need to
Yeah,
do.
you have to do
You have to
everything.
inverge not only the triplicities, but also the elements
Yeah.
of each
Yeah.
sign,
Wow.
and the whole thing has to be completely turned aside, which
Whoa.
blows away,
Yeah.
every any kind of astrological practice. But this seems to have been a theoretical proposal
Yeah.
that to accommodate Ptolemy and to make Ptolemy still authoritative in his
Okay.
expansion of
Yeah.
astrology.
Okay.
But I have all the rare charts that I have seen of the Southern Hemisphere, and I must say I haven't seen a lot of them because I haven't done research in the Southern Hemisphere and in the archives. But the few charts I've seen calculated for the Southern Hemisphere, they are not doing any inversion whatsoever in regards to
Yeah.
rulerships or elements or anything else. They are practicing exactly as you would expect
As you
it.
would. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Here's
Gemini,
a
anything
place
to
where a
add there?
sidereal here's a place where a sidereal zodiac does not struggle, right? They're just saying it's because of that star. And there's that star, whether it's high above your ground or close to the ground, all of the stars of the ecliptic can be seen anywhere between the Arctics on Earth, right? But when you consider a tropical zodiac as a seasonal device, and so as Luis was explaining, right, Ptolemy's describing this dispositorship and dignity situation through seasonal eyes, then we reach these challenges. So my question has been, if the tropical zodiac is not seasonal, if it's not constellational, which it certainly is not, and if it's not seasonal, then what in the heavens is it? And that's where we get to the armillary sphere. And so I just want to show this to everyone. By the way, typically if you go find an armillary sphere online, it is going to be absolutely incorrect. I had to actually take this one apart and put it back together. And with most of them, I couldn't do this. Somebody broke it at one point, and then that's been copied again and again. And so just to warn you of that. But the way that these should look, okay, so this is Earth rotating, right? And so we see Earth's equator, the plane of the day, and other parallels. And then this is the ecliptic, right? And so that's Earth's orbital plane, right? And the ecliptic crosses the equator moving north at the Pisces Aries cusp. Again, I'm talking Earth zodiac, the tropical zodiac. The north point is the Tropic of Cancer. So when people say that the tropical zodiac doesn't work because the signs don't align to the constellations like they used to, frankly, they never can because the constellations vary significantly in size. They're forgetting the truth that when the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, it's shining directly above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. Right? So some people will say that's Gemini because the sun's with the twins constellation. I said, well, why don't you call it the Tropic of Gemini then? And typically when I challenge an astronomer with that, they're like, those things don't have anything to do with each other. Like, yes, they do. Like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the signs of the tropical zodiac are directionally aligned. And I would suggest they might be directionally defined, at least from a global point of view. So this is north, right? Earth's rotational axis literally defines the cardinal direction. It's not the magnetic poles, like those migrate. Some even suggest they switch places over times, but true north, true south, right? That's all about Earth's rotation. And the tropical zodiac is the only one that actually includes Earth's rotation because the equator is about the rotation and the tropical zodiac is about the interface of the ecliptic, the plane of the year, and the equator, which is the plane of the day. The sidereal zodiacs, constellational zodiacs cannot claim this, okay? An important truth here that we have not known for that long, this is actually something that William Herschel, who discovered Uranus, also discovered. He was not the only one. But they call it the apex of the sun's way. that we figured out or remembered that Earth is not the center of the universe, right? The heliocentric nature of the solar system was rediscovered, maybe discovered for the first time by Copernicus and the like. Before Copernicus, but a lot of people got burned alive for saying it until he didn't, right? But anyway, it was long then assumed that the sun did not move through space. And while Earth was orbiting the sun, right, and therefore bringing the sun to Earth's northern pole, that's the sun ingressing Cancer and shining above the Tropic of Cancer, for example, that the sun wasn't moving. Now we know it does. And very importantly, the sun is moving, generally speaking, Earth north. Okay, so if I say the signs are directional, it's still challenged from a tale of two hemispheres point of view. Because like my ecliptic I see in the south. For Julia, it's in the north, right? I'm convinced if you've seen the truth that in Egypt, southern Egypt was called Upper Egypt, and northern Egypt was called Lower Egypt. It's often said the reason why is because the Nile flows from a mountain in south to the mouth at the Mediterranean in the north. I believe it's all about the sun, or also about the sun. Why? Because in Egypt and anywhere else north of Earth's Tropic of Cancer, the sun is high in the southern sky at noon, and it's very low at the northern sky, right? And in midnight, the sun is north and beneath the ground, so lower and upper. Do you see what I'm saying?
And the chart orientation for a long time was south up.
Yeah.
Which makes a ton of sense. Oh, and so then the ascendant is on the right, Luis? Did they draw it that way? Oh, wait, no, it would be on the left. I'm sorry.
It would be on the left, yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, our charts are like that, right? Like, and so it's tricky for teaching Northern Hemisphere folks if you look at a chart and it compass rose.
Yeah.
Compass rose works really well for Southern Hemisphere students.
Yeah. Well, like if we're looking at a zero Aries chart and Capricorn's at the top, right? Like it's pointing to the top of the ecliptic, right? But it's south, right? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
east on the
represents
left,
south in that
south at the
sense.
top,
Yeah.
west on the right, north down
Yeah.
below. That's the Northern Hemisphere
Yeah.
chart. For the Southern Hemisphere, you kind of flip it around,
Yeah.
and the ascendant should be on the right,
Yeah.
east,
Yeah.
north, west, south, which is how the compass rose works. But
that's another idea. Do the directions represented by the signs also change in the southern hemisphere?
which is the question, right? Because again, like south in the Northern Hemisphere means flames, fire, where the north is water. Some say earth, right? But the opposite, energetic or temperament. But here's the key: Earth is moving through space and we're moving north. And so like the entire ship that we're all on has a zodiac that I feel works for the entire Earth. In fact, an interesting thing is because
universal zodiac, yes.
Because Julia is as far south of the equator as I am north, I can take her calculations for how long it takes Aries to rise and just apply that to my Libra. And if you calculate this for every place on Earth and then average, you're going to get 2 hours per sign. Right, so it's kind of criminal to teach that every sign rises in 2 hours, and you will hear that taught way too often because we just say, hey, it's 12 signs a day, the day is 24 hours long.
A lot of things are evened out, but yeah.
Right, and we divide the 24 hours by the 12 signs. Really, it shouldn't be 24 hours, but that's a different topic, right? So we just say 2 hours per sign, but no, because some signs are straight and take a long time to rise, and some are crooked and take a short time sign, that's not true. But if we average them out, around for the whole globe, we would get 2 hours per sign.
Yeah.
And like I find that to be an interesting thing. And so I'm kind of seeking this global description or reason for the tropical zodiac. And there's a book by Robert Lawler who spent a good amount of time with the original people in Australia. It's called Voices of the First Day. And supposedly he was given permission to reveal some of the ancient knowledge. And it was said that the Earth is like a ship and the Northern Hemisphere is like the bow of the ship, sorry, and the Southern Hemisphere is like the stern.
It makes sense from here. to be looking north. Do you know what I mean? It's
Well,
almost
but does it make sense from there because of all the globes that were in the classroom when you were a
well,
kid?
yeah, we look up north and the sun's up north and it's cold down south. It just makes sense. And it makes sense with the astrology in a way, as opposed to looking south to the heat. So and it's all everything's north, like everything together is north, as you're saying. So
Yeah, but so I mentioned this when we were talking ascension and descension of at the nodes, right, in northern latitude and southern latitude. But you can kind of think of it as future latitude and past latitude because our planet is literally moving north through space. We're not moving towards Polaris, we're moving more towards Vega. But
mhm.
Vega's our North Star in a different age. And I think that's a very interesting thing to consider because what in the heavens is the tropical zodiac? I mean, we can just say it's purely symbolic. But I need more, like the materialist in me needs more than that. Even
No,
though
well,
I'm
we can
happy these
see
guys
those
can put
0
out
points lining up, equators,
It's motion.
ecliptics,
Yeah.
horizons. Yeah.
It's what we were
Mm.
saying. It's a result of motion. Even if you're considering in a larger scale or just an Earth scale, it's the motion of the Earth. It's generated by the normal motion, observed in from different perspectives from north to south, but it's still motion. Those lines exist, those cross paths exist, those maximums and minimums exist. So probably that's what's generating the effect. It's motion itself.
and
Yeah.
two and more
Things
motions, but
moving.
primary and secondary motion, right? The spinning of Earth, which is tilted in respect to the orbit of Earth, there is a chance that that astronomical physics creates a 12-fold energetic field. I'm actually of that opinion. And so as the Earth is orbiting the sun, right, the North Pole is going to lean towards zero Cancer always. And zero Cancer will always be above the Tropic of Cancer. It's just once a year the Earth puts the sun there, right? If you consider the moon going around the Earth every month, it's getting to Earth's northern lean. That's the moon ingressing Cancer. That's the moon ingressing Capricorn. Zero Aries is due east, not of Lisbon or Oakland, California. Like those are different things, but there is a global north, there is a global south, and therefore there's a global east, and it happens to be the cusp of tropical Pisces and Aries, and that's why I feel the so-called natural zodiac, the zero Aries wheel, actually does have astronomical teeth.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's like
and
we got the skeleton, as you're showing that a Millery, you've got
yeah,
the skeleton and the planets are moving around, and yes, that's right. Yeah,
bones of Earth.
yeah. When I was in Prague, I saw the astrological clock. And of course, it's fantastic because, it's showing everything. But it's showing the signs in slow, in the fast rising signs and the slow moving. I'd love to see that in our astrology charts, right? Like that we've got, the quicker rising depending on location and all that kind of stuff because it just makes so much sense. Like you can see, it makes so much sense for what you're looking at in particular sort of time and place and what have you.
You can look up your ascensional times at AstroSeek. That
Okay. I'm
wonderful.
just saying, like visually, it would help
I
us to kind of understand.
I absolutely agree. But if anybody wants to look at this and not have to calc, I mean, you can just take a chart and any day of the year, look at what time zero Aries is rising, which will be a
And
different
yeah,
time every day. But
yeah,
then track that
yeah,
time until zero Taurus rises and write that down for your latitude, or you can go online.
yeah.
And astro-seek.com, if you choose the traditional astrology option there, scroll down beneath profections and zodiacal releasing, and you'll get to primary directions and circumambulations. And they have a printout there for your location of the ascensional times, which might be a cool thing to look at for you.
That link you just put in went to just us hosts, but anyway, that's often put it to everyone, Gemini.
Oh, I see. Let me
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
So it's just
Well, yeah,
astro-seek.com. Peter's site is an amazing site. And I could try to get more specific because they have
that's all right.
a traditional astrology calculator there. So let me add that link for everyone who's with us live. And you'll see after you type in your information that, I mean, actually, you'll even see, and let me put this link in, there's a ascensional rising times and oblique ascensional tables, and you can select your terrestrial latitude there, right? So for where you're living on Earth, and find your rising times.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot to consider. I mean, it's almost like, yeah, it's opening up something that's not talked about a lot, and we've got to come up with ways to, talk about it more. I'm just wondering if anyone in the audience has anything they want to sort of share or add or have thought about.
There was
Um,
something that happened before I wanted to address, which was I'd love to have a bubble helmet that marks the stars, etc. So, by the way, like as much as I'm really encouraging people to get outside and away from the small screen and engage with the living screen of the big sky out there, I have been playing with Stellarium planetarium software in virtual reality. And so you put the goggles on, and they have a Stellarium VR app, and you can go
ah,
inside your chart.
yeah,
And then
right.
you can look around and tilt your head back. You can even see through the
Did you have
ground.
to buy the VR?
You do have to buy the VR thing. So yeah, I got one for a couple $100, and
Okay, right. Oh, wow. Well, we'll invite you down with Luis, and you have to bring those.
right, and we can all go. Yeah, let's all join together for an in-person conference and then go VR.
Well, there will be a side show, like a sideshow. But I'd really love to see this topic as a stream at a conference. Do you know what I mean? Like if someone else doesn't do it, I am going to do it. Like at like a whole, days up, lots of thinking and lots of sort of, taking notes and piecing something more together, I think, about this is very interesting. Um, Anything else to add? I mean, of course, we could talk forever, but
Yeah,
Luis has been
so
working hard all week.
in Babylonian astrology, like before the 12 sign zodiac showed up, right? So it kind of came at the Mulapin. Many see this as sidereal, but they were also tracking shadow lengths of the sundial or the gnomon throughout the year, right? Which is a tropical thing. But they also spoke, and it would be more for those of you who are familiar with the term declination, which is an angular measurement north or south of the equator. And north of the equator in the northern hemisphere is high and south is low, for the reasons I was describing before. The opposite would be true in the southern hemisphere. But they spoke about these three regions of the heavens, which were Enlil and Anu and Enki.
That's right, yeah.
Enki was a god of the earth, right? So that's the low stuff, and Enlil was a god of the air, that's the high stuff, and Anu is in between, right? And this would be one way that was starting to get closer to tropical cosmology, right? Because like for right now, Jupiter's in Gemini. I'm getting really high Jupiter. Yulia's getting really low Jupiter. In Babylon, they would have really high Jupiter right now, higher than me because it's closer to the equator than California is, right? But there's a lot of things from the ancient astrology you have to wonder about. There's something really special coming up for Venus in March of 2025. I can share right now if you want to take the time. And we could also look at something from ancient Babylon in regards to Venus and why this would be written or chiseled into the tablet different if they were looking from Australia.
Yeah, show us, because it's a good example. Yes.
There's one other thing I want to mention, though, which is kind of off topic, but maybe not. 80% of human beings live north of the equator. And this just has to do with the land mass. And so I wonder if the collective consciousness was the summation of individuals' astronomical experience, if that also would lean the needle towards the northern hemisphere side of the gauge. I think that's a northern hemispheric and kind of rude thing to say, but it is an interesting thing to consider. And look, dolphins and penguins, they get stars too, so we shouldn't only consider the
But we were here first. Anyway.
Do either of you have a reflection on that? It's something I've been considering lately, and I wonder how that rings for you.
Well, I mean, yes, it makes it more so northern hemisphere focused, just overall, because it's more populated and more people doing it over there, up there. There's a small amount of astrologers here compared to the northern hemisphere, that's for sure. I know there's a lot in South America, way more astrologers than here. And Africa, I'm not that sure about, but I think it's quite small like Australia. So the interest is not there to explore. Do you know what I mean? Enough. If it was a northern hemisphere problem, it would be worked out by now or something. Do you know what I mean? Or like because of the
Absolutely.
amount of minds and people thinking about it.
Well, they didn't solve the houses, so
They didn't.
I would.
But we might find something really ancient from other places, you know. I mean, I wish instead of naming these southern hemisphere constellations like the microscope and other images from the Industrial Revolution, when northern hemisphere folk finally had the technology that could get them down there to spend some time under the southern hemisphere stars, we would just ask people down there what they were. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
Yeah,
and this is
yeah.
also, you know, I'm always trying to defend the tropical zodiac because I'm consistently attacked by rationalist astronomers and siderealists alike. Um, but constellations are terrestrial. You know, I think it's a really important thing to know, right? Stars are celestial. Constellations are entirely terrestrial.
Yeah, because the patterns are only seen from here.
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
you go to
yeah,
Mars, they would be pretty similar,
yeah,
though the ecliptic
yeah.
is different on
But
Mars because the
they're
tilt is
all,
different.
I mean, the constellations were markers, markers of seasons rising at certain times. They were patterns that when we see that pattern or, that constellation, it's the time for emu eggs. It's
Right.
time,
But see,
yeah.
like what I know is the scorpion, and when I used to live further from the equator up in Seattle, like parts of the scorpion never even get above the ground.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
right.
So like a scorpion's walking on the ground in Hawaii, they know it is Maui's fish hook, right? It's the
Yeah.
literally the hook that Maui used to fish the islands out of the sea, and it rises like that. In some places in Australia, it was seen as a parrot because the
Well,
scorpion's super high above the
yeah.
ground, like a
Well,
bird.
it's so high that if you're in the outback or you can't even make it out in the in the galaxy above. It's like is that Scorpio in there? Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
And
So
also
it's
because
really
it's so
disguised
close,
because
because
there's
it's
so
so
many
close to the Milky
stars.
Way,
Yeah, because
too, right?
it's in the Milky Way. Like it's like wow. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
so here for me to find galactic center, I need to find the scorpion's tail and the archer's arrow because they
yeah,
point to the galactic center
yeah,
along with
yeah.
the knee of Ophiuchus, right? When I'm in Hawaii, I need to use the galactic center to find the scorpion because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
right.
so
Well,
much
yeah,
Milky
yeah,
Way
yeah,
and so bright
exactly.
and
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's fascinating to watch. Wow. Gosh, we've got a lot of missions to do.
I mean, the other thing I'll share in classes when I talk about this and should we be flipping signs is I'll say, and Julius Simas. Um,
What's
and
that?
other great Southern Hemisphere astrologers who sit with so many Southern Hemisphere clients, and tropical astrology works, right? So, wouldn't we have found it true by now if this
We're going,
system,
this doesn't work. Well, again, yeah, there's a lot to be considered, but I have found the nodal thing we talked about to be significantly with the people I've talked to. I'm not talking about Libra becomes Aries and all that kind of stuff. It's not something I've seen. Again,
hmm,
I don't, again, that flipping of signs. That's the first thing people ask. So do you flip the signs? No, 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 no. We consider. But I have seen the nodal axis presenting itself differently in people's lives. Yes.
yeah, I wouldn't know too, because I don't work with the nodes like it's where you're going and coming from. So I think I would
Yeah, I
see
think
that,
you
yes.
said that last time. But anyway,
Yeah. I would say I have seen a couple clients from the Southern Hemisphere recently when I did switch the signs, it seemed to make a little bit more sense. But
okay.
typically, I mean, and that's like a very small percentage of Southern Hemisphere clients that I've sat with. But there was a couple of cases where it's like, dang, my astrology is not working. And sometimes it's like that, right? I have a long way till mastery.
Mm,
But in this case, I was like, let me just flip this thing around, and I was like, that seems like the story that she's telling me.
Wow.
So
We've got to do some more
interesting.
experiments. Luis, have you got Southern Hemisphere clients that you have?
I
What do you
do.
consider?
I do because I work with Brazil a
Yeah,
lot, so because of the common language, it's Portuguese.
yeah,
And I don't see any need for inversing anything. The nodes, I'm not sure, because the nodes are either they're very obvious
yeah.
in the chart, or if they're just alone in the house, and at least in the way I use them,
It's
it's
not a
very
big deal.
difficult to really
Yeah,
figure out exactly what kind of
yeah.
anomaly they're representing.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But
Uh-huh.
I have put out that for a number of years to students, especially my Brazilian students, test it.
Test it.
Test it in
Yeah.
charts where
Yep.
the
Yep.
node is very obvious, for example, in the 10th house or
Yeah.
with the planet in the 10th house. And if you have the south or the node, you should see different effects
Yeah.
on the person's career. So we need examples where that is clear, which it's not always the case with
We need
charts.
examples. That's the whole thing. Yeah. So if anyone wants to put their hand, I have got someone that's going to help me with the questionnaire or whatever. But so yeah, more work now. Gemini, do you want to show us this amazing Venus thing that's going to
I
happen?
do.
Okay.
Luis, can I just ask one more question though? I assume
Mhm.
you're working with primary directions with your clients, North and South Hemisphere, right?
Yes.
And I imagine letting the computer do the calculations in regards to ascensional times.
Yeah. And verifying it because, for example, you don't even go south. If you're working, trying to rectify charts, I've recently tried to rectify the chart for someone born way north in Russia, and that ascendant would jump a sign in a few
No time.
minutes of
Mm,
difference because the distortion is so big, and you have to be careful because in primary directions you used to go very slowly, but over there it just jumps. So when you're in extremes, it's going to be careful, and of course you have to inverse the ascensions, the oblique ascensions,
mhm.
and when you're working in the southern hemisphere, if you're doing rectification, usually the software does that properly. I always verify because I'm very suspicious of software when it comes to these things.
All right, well,
So
I'm going to reach out for a lesson, but that's a tale for another time.
yes.
On that level, I will say this. I had a client who was born in Norway, Capricorn rising,
Mm.
um, and she moved. And by the way, she had a Capricorn ascendant and a Sagittarius midheaven. Right. So the further you get from Earth's equator, this thing gets more extreme. I have a client from Fairbanks, Australia, Fairbanks, Alaska, who has a Sagittarius ascendant and a Sagittarius midheaven.
Mm,
And then things get pretty wonky. Do you know what I mean? And so, anyway, but this client, she moved from where she was born in Norway to a place much further north, north of the Arctic Circle. And she came to me because she was feeling completely invisible. And it's like she would walk in a room and people didn't even know she was there. And this was an experience that she was used to having. Um, and where she moved, her ascendant degree doesn't rise.
oh wow, yeah,
So,
wow.
like beyond the Arctics, things get even wonkier, right? And it's really fun. Play with charts up there. You'll get to see some fun things. But I thought
Mm,
that was pretty intriguing. She was like, nobody sees me, and her ascendant like literally can't rise in the location where she had moved. Okay, so I'll do this quickly. I want to
yeah.
start
Oh,
and end.
I was
This is
just
the
going to
Venus.
add something in regard to like relocations again from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere and things like progressions and stuff. Like a lot of people just use the natal chart, but if someone's lived in Australia from born in New York but lived here for 30 years, I will do the relocated chart and that changes, the progressed ascendant, progressions, directions so much. That's what I just wanted to add that because what you're talking about, really, in the end, yeah? In so
Yeah,
many
and
ways, yeah.
the way that most astrologers progress the ascendant, it's not a progression, it's a direction. So it's like
Direction,
an
yeah,
important thing to
yeah,
know.
yeah.
It's like for modern astrologers, it's typically as close as you'll get to the primary directed ascendant. And you're not going to get there. I mean, it depends on the math you choose, but They're let me just leave that there for now.
Yeah, I just
Um,
wanted to clear that up so people might not understand what was said, but yeah.
So this is the Venus tablet of Ammisaduqa. I mean, this is like one of the oldest astronomical records that we are aware of. It comes out of Babylon, and I'm going to speak to it in just a little bit. But, I think my first work at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, well, maybe not my first, but certainly the most that I've done is with Yulia and Ariel Gutman and with some others exploring Venus through the Venus star over time, right? The Venus star point that we have coming up is a very special one for a bunch of reasons. So of course it's nearing the equinox point. 8 years from here in 2033, it'll be much closer because the Venus star precesses by about 2 degrees every 8 years when Venus and Sun draw a pentacle around the Earth and through our zodiac. But I'm going to show you a couple interesting things here. One, I'm going to take you to a map. And let me first do this, because seeing some of these things on the astrocartography map, I think can be very helpful. So these are in that moment that I had charted where the 12 signs are rising. And this was shown in that animation you showed before, Yulia. I just kind of wasn't able to track it so well, but kind of what signs rise, I'll say to the left and to the right, just for the sake of brevity here. In any moment, the Earth is like a 12-paneled beach ball, right? And so like in the moment I had charted, this is what I call the Sagittarius panel. I could cast a chart for, here in Brasilia, and we're going to see a Sagittarius ascendant. Okay, and if I come up to Ireland, Sagittarius as well. So when you play with whole sign charts, you're kind of only getting your beach ball panel, I like to say. I'm going to bring in the midheaven lines for this particular moment in time I have charted, and just let you see, like, this is a really cool display. Now you have 0 Cancer on the Tropic of Cancer, right? About 23.5 degrees north of Earth's equator. You have the equator degrees, which are 0 tropical Libra and 0 tropical Aries on the equator. And now you can very clearly see southern signs, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, taking us to the southern extreme, which is the Tropic of Capricorn, coming back from there to the equator. And then the northern signs, which are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, to the northern extreme, Cancer, like that, right? And so as the sun travels this path each year, goes to the northern extreme and to the southern. The moon does it every month, Jupiter in about 12 years, as we know, right? All right, so let me bring in some astrocartography lines in this moment. Or actually, hold on, let me do this first. So I'm just going to show you, like that case I was talking about before. We can see Cancers rising in this particular moment. I have charted in Japan, up in Siberia, all the way down to New Zealand here and further south as well. If I cast a chart down here in this moment, do you see how it's a Cancer ascendant and a Taurus midheaven, right? And why? Because Cancer is a north sign. It rises north of east. And in the southern hemisphere, this is due north. And the further you go from the equator, the further north of east this degree is going to be. So it gets closer and closer to due north, right? And so the fourth quadrant gets smaller. The third quadrant gets larger. But I mean, AstroGold just created this opportunity and maps for us to move this thing around and have the chart update real time. It is so cool.
I haven't seen that. I have to work out.
It's good, right? So what you do is you push this button up in the upper right to put a chart on the screen, and then you click this little thing that looks like, the Google
I
map,
see. Oh, you're just
right?
Moving it like that.
And you just move it around.
Okay.
And you can change house systems, and you can learn so much here, okay?
fantastic.
So anyway, here I'm in a Cancer rising space, but on the Taurus midheaven side, as soon as I cross that Taurus midheaven line, now you're going to see the chart is Cancer ascendant, Aries midheaven. That's certainly going to be true near the equator, all right? Where even though it's Cancer rising, you get a pretty square thing because the equator is directly overhead. And then we're going to come up to the northern hemisphere, and we get this Cancer rising Pisces midheaven, because this is south, and north of east is further from south than south of west is, right? So this is the importance of the kind of directional nature of northern and southern signs that help us see why we don't have a cross, right? A perpendicular cross on the chart. Very rarely do, okay? I mean, I could even go up here in this moment where we have a Cancer ascendant into Cancer midheaven, and the software can't even deal with it, right? Okay. So let me just show you a really cool thing about this Venus, and maybe this is something we could explore together later, and I'll show it in Stellarium as well. So here
Shows
are
how hard it is to live up there.
right, it must be crazy. I mean, it's so extreme in living. We should maybe expect that the houses would also therefore be extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
That being
It's
said, if
reflecting.
zero Aries is rising, you still get the perfect cross.
Yeah, but it's reflecting nature. That's the thing. It's reflecting the experience
Yes,
that you're
yes.
having at that place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
these are, in this moment, I only have Venus and the Sun and the Moon shown on the chart.
Well, it's right over Melbourne at the Kazemi. Woohoo.
Right. And this is not the exact Cazimi
Oh,
moment,
sorry.
by the
Okay.
way,
Yeah.
because I wanted to put the Sun on
Oh, I
the
see. Yes.
descendant. And
Yeah.
everybody, I hope, knows that the way that these charts work, if you're casting a quadrant chart, Placidus, Porphyry, whatever, right? This is the ground, yes, and this is the meridian. Okay, so above the ground going up, above the ground coming down, beneath the ground going down, beneath the ground coming up, right? Quadrants. So this is an image of Venus and the Sun have set. But they haven't. One of them hasn't. So we need to use in the map what are called in-mundo lines, which consider not only the zodiac degrees, where in this case we would see the moon, Venus, and the Sun on top of one another, but also how far a planet is from the Sun's path. And so now you see this separation between Venus and the Sun. Okay, this is in this moment of time where the Sun is rising. This is where the Sun is setting. All right, so in between it is nighttime. This is midnight. And in between this way, it's daytime. This is midday. And this is where the Sun is directly overhead in this moment. Now the Earth spins from the west to the east. So in Portugal, where Luis is in this moment, it's about to be moonrise. All right, and by the way, this is not the moment in which we're talking. This is this Venus Cazimi chart. What I want to show is up here, like in Moscow, Venus is about to rise, and she will rise well before the Sun does. We go over here, I cast the chart for California, but it would be much more so like in Yellowknife. The Sun has set, and Venus has not yet. So even though they're conjunct in the chart, let me show you this in Stellarium. Is Stellarium on the screen, Yulia?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so actually let me relocate this moment to Yellowknife, which is in Canada well north of the equator. This is Venus's latitude, right? So all planets have their own orbital paths, right? The moon snakes north and south of the ecliptic plane every month. Venus does this on her own orbital path, right? And at this time, and this might be why some say in modern astronomy, the zodiac is a band of 8.5 degrees north and south of the ecliptic, because Venus and Mercury can get that far away. And in this moment of this Venus-Sun conjunction, so same longitude, same zodiac degree, Venus has significant northern latitude. And in northern hemisphere places, in very far north places, especially like Yellowknife, Canada, this means that Venus is going to set well after the degree of the zodiac that she projects to will. Okay, I am convinced, and I want to find folks, that we could get a photographer in Russia in this exact same moment. Let me take you to Moscow, right? So here, this is a Venus-Sun conjunction, and I think clouds allowing, we're going to be able to see Venus as an evening star while she is conjunct the Sun. Okay, if I go over to Moscow, it's not exactly where I need to be, but I think it will get the point across. And go look to the morning star side, we're going to find Venus visible as a morning star while conjunct the
Already,
Sun.
and she's not
Okay.
even. Oh my God, that's great. That's awesome.
And so how cool would it be if we can get, so when Yulia and Ariel and I first did one of these Venus star point, transmissions at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. It was 8 years before this. It was a Venus Sun Aries conjunction.
Yeah,
Retrograde.
we started at the Venus Aries. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And I was coming in with what I had been trained to use a distance of 10 degrees between Venus and Sun for heliacal setting and heliacal rising. And Ariel said, with the mountains and stuff, I just use 0 degrees. Well, since that time, I learned, not technically or not from wonderful books like those penned by Luis, but rather by going out to worship Venus, and then especially Mercury, and saying, hey, he's 20 degrees from the sun. Why can't I see him right now? And the reason is he was in a sign that's crooked, right?
Yeah.
And setting basically at the same time of the sun, even as far from the sun as if in a straight sign, I would get a lot of time with Mercury in the sky. You see how that works? All right. So in this interesting moment, there is a chance that we could have a photographer in Russia and a photographer in Canada, one showing us Venus as a morning star, in the same moment, the other showing us Venus as an evening star, while Venus is conjunct the sun.
Remember, there was some project, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or something, where some photographer said, everyone take a photo at this time around the planet, like, 11:11 or whatever, from your place. So 11:11 kept living for a whole day. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was posted up. So in that sort of light, like, you're seeing, where are you seeing, Venus. Not that all of us would see it, of course, as you were saying. But yeah, incredible to think, okay, Venus is, because, Venus is in the beams of the sun and not to be seen, but here she is. And it's the Aries point that is the one that she does this, or does she do it with another one?
For the northern hemisphere.
For the northern hemisphere.
And in the southern hemisphere, because the straight and crooked signs are reversed,
it's Capricorn.
It would best be Libra, but not until the Venus star point gets near 0 Libra, and we won't be alive. And it's not only about the straight and crooked signs, but it's also about the latitude. So this has to do with where Venus's nodes are. So let me just show one more thing. This is the Venus tablet of Ammisaduqa. And what was happening in Babylon is they were tracking when retrograde Venus would disappear as an evening star into the beams of the sun, and then how many days it took, and on which day Venus then reappeared as a morning star in the east, right? And if you look at the table, you'll see that sometimes it's 15 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Then at other times you get 16 days, and then 12 days, 3 days, 17 days, okay? It's going to repeat after 5 of these cycles. That's the Venus star. And these 2 or 3 day disappearances, they would be like the one I was just showing, because Venus is far from the sun in celestial latitude. The sun sets, and even though Venus is conjunct the sun in longitude, there's Venus. And so we get these very short disappearances. Now, if that tablet had been chiseled as far south of the equator as these Babylonian astronomers were north, it would all be flipped around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then if we took an average, they'd all be like, a week.
Well, this is the whole thing, all the meanings that we get. Sorry, Luis. No, go.
No, it's like you experience as, for example, if you're calculating primary directions, now everyone does it in the computer, and suddenly the value goes all wrong, because I've seen that with Venus quite often. While the Venus is in the 6th house zodiacally, but it's still above the horizon. So you're still having to compute with the diurnal arc and not the nocturnal arc. And that flips completely the calculation. So when the calculations suddenly go wrong, you say, wait a minute, it has an extreme latitude. So it hasn't set yet, although it looks like it.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. It has already set, despite appearing projected into the...
And we're saying it's a 6th house, but it's still up there in the 7th in a way, like beaming in.
So that's such an intriguing thing. Like George Harrison was born with a 1st house moon, but the moon had risen. And it's an example I love to use in astromap teaching.
Yeah, I think you showed us last time or something, or you have shown us, I believe.
Yeah, maybe in the nodes when I talked about
I think
this
you did,
example of lunar latitude. But, is the moon in the first or is the moon in the 12th? And this is just like what Luis just shared. Like most modern astrologers, if they get to the maps and the astronomy of the maps, that's where they're first introduced to this idea of in zodiaco versus in mundo, if at all. But this is an ancient thing, and for the reasons that Luis was just explaining.
Mm.
It's not just about the zodiac degree that the planet directs to, but we're interested in the planet's path. And Venus isn't tied to the course of the sun.
Mm. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I could have a week of this.
This is
But
definitely my happy place. So
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you
it
so
is,
much,
isn't it?
Julia, for inviting me. And
Well,
Luis, thanks for coming. It's really nice to spend some
Well,
time
it's
together. And thanks
great.
for everybody who's here live and
thanks to
listening
both of
later.
you. You're amazing, both of you. I love it. Really, really good. And I am going to work on getting you down here for CIA's, Star Magic Work Conference retreat. No, retreat. We want to be under the stars. So I will work on that. 2026, how's your plans?
There's the UAC
The
for the
UAC,
first time in a
yes.
while. So, but
I was a
maybe
bit
that's in the
disappointed with that.
autumn.
I was a bit disappointed because it's in the same place. I have this thing about, yeah, I don't know, same place. It's not as appealing to go to somehow. So maybe in the April timing of 26.
Yeah, we could do autumn Southern
Let's have a look at the
Hemisphere
maps.
and then
Luis, I
have
know
that
you're
be
busy, but
autumn.
we would love to invite you down to Australia for,
Oh, I would love to go, and if we plan in advance, of course, I
yeah,
would love
yeah.
to.
Anyway, let's think about it a bit more and I'll keep you in touch. But Luis, do tell us when you have what you're writing now and when it's available
Yes,
for us to look at and
I
read and
will. I
share
will.
and sounds amazing. Can't wait. And Gemini, incredible what you know as well.
What I'm learning, I benefit a lot from Stellarium astronomy
Yeah,
software, so I do like really encourage you to play that. I mean, when I lived in
yeah,
Seattle and you just can't see the stars for months at a time, that's where I started studying the stars, and it really helps.
yeah.
Luis, different topic, but I just have to ask you real quick. What is the oldest evidence that you're aware of astrology looking at relocated birth charts? So if
That's a very good
Ah,
question. Actually, the first example I've seen, which they don't call it a relocation, is exactly when where there's a theory, what's the sign of the new world? And what he does as a theory, of course, it's quite clever astrologically. If it works or not, that's a whole other conversation. But what he does is, if the Tema Mundi has Cancer, 15 Cancer rising, and he projects that the Tema Mundi is happening somewhere around the meridian of Damascus. That's the theory of the time. So what sign was rising in the New World, which for him is the city of Mexico? And so he relocates the Tema Mundi to the city of Mexico the best he can. He does blunder the calculations because they don't have the longitude measurement accurately yet. And he says Capricorn is rising there. So Capricorn is the sign attributed to the new world.
hmm.
Because when the world was created at the beginning of things, Capricorn was rising in the new world. Which we can plot a lot of holes in that in that theory, but it is the first instance I have ever seen of a relocated chart, which is the Tema Mundi.
yeah, right.
Fascinating. And who did that and
It's
when?
Enrico Martinez. He's working for the Spanish Crown. I don't recall if he's Dutch or German origin. I'm not clear now. But he's working in New Mexico. He was an engineer, a mathematician, and he's the first printer there as well. So he prints this wonderful book where he gives all this rationale of how to deal with things astrologically in the new world. So he's the first one to really put it there from the mouth of someone who is actually there dealing with things. And he has this relocation theory. So he relocates the Tema Mundi so he could find out, what's
Yeah,
happening there.
yeah.
What he sees is Capricorn rising and Venus, which he considers a Tema Mundi with Venus in Libra. Venus is in the midheaven. So he gives that it is Capricorn. So there's a melancholy there, but there's also a kind of fertility and Venusian characteristic to the land itself. And he draws.
Can I just ask? I was thinking about this the other day. The Thema Mundi and the Cancer Rising. I remember learning this many, years ago at the beginning. But why was it Cancer Rising? It was because with the moon being closest, or it was because Cancer was. It was. That's what I remember hearing. But after being to Prague, I was thinking about this because they have their zodiac aligned with Cancer and Capricorn, like a sacred locational zodiac, but it's aligned with the solstice point of sunset and the winter solstice point, summer solstice point of sunset, winter solstice point of sunrise. So it gives that diagonal as a sacred point. And I thought, well, that's the Cancer Capricorn, let's say primal way back, aligning with the highest point and the lowest point, right? And making it, sort of the diagonal sort of sacred marker, let's say. Anyway, I mean,
No, it could be. Yeah,
Well,
I don't know if there's a reason. I think it's the moon. They always associate
yeah, I
it with
remember it was the moon, but
and that's
to me,
one
it's
of the
this highest point of the sun being
yeah.
Cancer. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting about it is everything's at 15 degrees, and so you find some astronomical impossibilities, like Mercury cannot be 30 degrees from the sun, and Venus cannot be 60, right? And
Yeah.
even further in the other
Yeah.
direction. But an interesting thing is,
It is
first of all, why
symbolic.
do we have 12 signs? A reason I just recently saw, and I'm not saying this is why, but it's interesting, is that the beams of the sun extend 15 degrees to the other side. That's 13 degrees of sunbeams. And so if you think about the sun at 15 Leo in the Thema Mundi, right, which if it was tropical, and I'm not saying it was, so please don't cast stones, you historians, but if it was tropical, what is that? That's the sun at the cross quarter point, right, middle of northern hemisphere summer. And then you have the moon 30 degrees away, which would be the most lunar time of the cycle because we're told that waxing is solar and waning is lunar.
Yeah.
It's
Could
an
be.
interesting thing to consider.
Yeah,
I
it is.
also wonder
It is.
about precession and if there's anything about the Crab constellation being aligned, I don't know, to the equinox point. That would take us way too far back. But yeah, so there's a lot to
Okay. In that sense, it might have been the equinox. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all have another 2 hours? Let's get into this.
Let's finish it for now. I've actually got to get going. And Luis, I know, and Gemini, yes, we know you could talk for hours, or we all could. But look, again, wonderful discussion. Let's do it again. Maybe not take a year in between. So prompt some stuff, to happen, let's say, and keep it going. And thanks to everyone for being online and whoever will listen after this. Share your experiences. We want to hear from you. We also want to hear from you, don't we? Because
Yeah, I mean, a question I'll just pose it. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, does the tropical zodiac with the ancient approach work for you? And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, have you tried flipping the signs? Does that seem to work for you better? It'd be really nice to hear
I'm
from
going to
you.
put in a really simple questionnaire, but I will put it to you guys just to sort of say, yeah, that's a good, or I'd add this, just again, so we can sort of share it around and get something more happening with this. So, again, wonderful. The sun has just gone into Sagittarius, so it's a good time to leave this to contemplate the rest. All right. And yeah, everyone else, play around and see what you can find. And thanks for being here. And mostly to you too. I appreciate you both very much. Thank you. See you next time, hey? All the
Next
best.
time.
Bye.